Good afternoon to you. Mark Sara, HurricaneTrack here. Thursday now, the 14th of November, 2024. The main topic in today's update, models aren't forecasts. Something I need to make sure I remember. It's hard sometimes. You look at the models, you think, oh, that's just a few days out. This looks like it's going to happen. You look at the pattern, everything seems to fit. And then all of a sudden, the rug gets pulled out from under us, and we are all fooled collectively. So I'm going to kind of dissect what happened and how we got to where we are. Now, make no mistake, what is now Tropical Storm Sara will bring impacts, and some pretty significant impacts by way of flooding, rain, for our friends down there in Central America, and I don't want to detract from that at all. We could be looking at a major disaster down there again from very heavy rainfall, but yes, the threat of a hurricane coming toward Florida, all of that pretty much off the table. And a reminder, a very humbling reminder, models aren't forecasts. So let's get started, see what we've got. Remember this? I do. It was just a couple of days ago, the 12Z run on November the 12th, by day 5, had a significant, powerful hurricane sitting in the Western Caribbean. And he can even go back to day 4 at that time. Also, significant hurricane. Day 3, 72 hours out, it was like, oh, here we go. But the key was the distance from land over here, that this was fairly well offshore of Honduras and Nicaragua in the Western Caribbean, taking advantage of a very favorable upper environment. Now, this is what it showed in terms of back on that forecast where it would be today at this exact time. And this is very important to note. So again, that forecast 54 hours out, this is a separate tab, I want to prove this point. This is where it was showing it would be today, and the reality is it is much closer to land over here, and that interaction, and the fact, I want to bring this up because a lot of people have said, partially rightfully so, oh, the closeness, the proximity to land is impeding it. That's part of it, but the other side of this equation as to why it's not where it is, where it was supposed to be according to the models, is it didn't intensify nearly as quickly, especially as the GFS was suggesting. And so that's another big part of it. The distance away from Central America is certainly a big deal. It wasn't that, it was much closer today. It is closer today than the model was indicating, and it didn't strengthen nearly as quickly as advertised. So here we are. So this is where it is, much closer. It's even closer than that now, probably, to Central America, and it is much, much weaker overall, but it is a tropical storm, and we don't want to, as I said, ignore that fact. That's very important because it is going to bring quite a lot of rainfall to the area. In fact, we can switch this over, and I can show you the total accumulated precip that is forecast over the next few days, going to be substantial down there. Some of these, you're looking at those gold colors, 10 to 12 plus inches, and this is in inches of rainfall, and just over the next 5 days, that is a big red flag down there. And rain, of course, is an impact, and a substantial one. Now, luckily, compared to what Mitch did back in 1998, it won't be nearly as deep into Honduras as we saw with Mitch, but nevertheless, a lot of rain. Again, the cruise industry, a lot of cruise ships like to go down there. What is it, Roatan? And yeah, that's a big problem for them, and the tourism industry that likes the reefs off of Belize. This is going to be a big impact system, and certainly the headline I had a few days ago of "It's time to sound the alarms" is still relevant. It's just for a different reason, and we just don't want to ever lose sight that rain is an absolute deadly impact there, and you can see how it's going to accumulate over the coming days. All right, so even the old euro, not immune to just completely screwing the pooch here. This is also 0Z the 12th into the 13th, right? So again, not that long ago, this is what it was showing, indicating that it would stay pretty far offshore, relatively speaking, and that it would stay there, intensify significantly, and then start to make that turn, eventually heading toward Florida and across Florida. We all saw it. Hook, line, and sinker, we fell for it. And it is not going to pan out for various and sundry reasons, which is fine for Florida. I'm sure you guys are just like, hey, we voted no for that. But what's not going to happen in Florida does mean, as I've showed you, that we're going to have a tremendous amount of rainfall. In fact, let me just show you on the latest visible satellite loop. Not very well organized, so the modeling definitely messed that up. Generally speaking, it was going to be farther offshore over here, much better organized, but it is not. But that doesn't matter in terms of all this heavy rain that's pinwheeling in over Honduras here to the north, even parts of Nicaragua down here. There is Belize over there on the left side. And this is going to just pile up that rain because it's going to be such a slow-moving tropical storm. Here's a post over on Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, fine with me. Newly formed Tropical Storm Sara as seen from the GOES-16 satellite. And that's the headline. It'll produce heavy rainfall capable of significant, life-threatening flash flooding and mudslides across portions of Central America through early next week. The terrain down there, rugged. And, that hasn't changed since 1998. They hadn't gotten rid of the mountains down there, so that's going to be a real big problem. Looking at some of the different stuff on Dr. Cowan's dashboard over here, again, the model guidance earlier was suggesting a path that would kind of come up maybe something like this, either side of it a little bit, some kind of an envelope like that. That is not going to happen. Nope. Instead, different factors, weaker, longer, so it's more west, closer to land, and the ridging over the south is stronger. Just all these different puzzle pieces that the models were trying to figure out, and I fell into it. I was like, oh, come on, 5 days out, they're going to nail this, especially something that looked so obvious. Well, sometimes that is not the case. It's not as obvious as it looked like. So I don't think there's going to be any impacts to really worry about at all for our friends in Florida. Now, I got to be careful because the same thing applies. When you don't think something's going to develop and it does, you can get burned that way. And I want to make that very, very clear. It's not just the hype side, and that word has a lot of interesting connotations, certainly. Hyping something up, you got to talk about it, you got to make sure people are aware. There's that line of, becoming too, as they say, this definition or the word fear-mongering. I got to look that up. What exactly does that mean? Story for another day, but you don't want to undersell something and then you end up with a situation like Otis, okay? It can go the other way. Or Michael, back in 2018. Those were, the forecasts were based on the models. And the models aren't the forecast, though. They are part of the equation. So you can look at the models. Let's just take Otis last year. You looked at the models, and the models were like, Otis probably isn't going to do very much. And it was a Category 5 going into a major metropolitan Mexican city. And we saw the results of that. And so the models themselves are not the forecast. And when you make a forecast off of models, sometimes you can get burned big time. So, more than likely, this will not end up being a big deal for Florida. But again, because the models don't show it, you can fall in the trap the other way. You can see very easily how that can go, right? Right. All right, let's move on. Other interesting weather is occurring. Some of it's going to warrant my attention. See all this purple out here? Those are for storm warnings. And you're talking winds, I think, what is that, in excess of 60 knots, 70 miles per hour, all along a good chunk of the Carolinas here. Let's click on eastern North Carolina. A whole host of stuff from high wind warning, storm warning, coastal flood warning. This is a coastal storm, a nor'easter that's going to develop, and it's got those northeast winds. A friend up at Fox Weather yesterday, Greg Diamond, reminded me of why they are called nor'easters. It's not just because they move northeast. You get that northeast wind. And in this case, it's going to be north to northeast wind that is really going to be problematic here across the outer banks of North Carolina, including the different river basins through here coming off the Pamlico Sound, Ocracoke Island, Hatteras Village up here, and then parts of down east North Carolina, as we call it, could have a rapid rise of water 2 to 4 feet. Now, that's not going to sweep people away and knock houses over. Well, it might in some parts of the Outer Banks. You never know with those big waves out there. But it is still potentially life-threatening if you do something stupid. So you just have to be very careful. Now, look, I am going to be heading out there later tonight. I want to make sure I go to my son's basketball game. Family stuff's very important. So after that, I'm going to get some dinner with the family, and then I'm heading up to Rodanthe Robert Ray from Fox Weather. He and I are going to cover this tomorrow. And fingers crossed, we are hoping to bring Fox Weather viewers something absolutely incredible. And I'll also share it on our Patreon as well. A new era of covering weather hopefully begins tomorrow if everything goes as expected. So if you saw me on the update this morning, the discussion, yes, that's all still in play. Looking forward to trying something brand new. All right, so a little bit more on this from this infographic. A dramatic increase in north to northeast winds. This quick switch in wind direction and speed will bring significant coastal impacts, especially on the Outer Banks on Friday. So yeah, this is look at those wind speeds in there. The projected gusts, 62 in Rodanthe, where I'm going to be, 66 down in Buxton, then out at the Diamond Shoals, 71 miles per hour. And it doesn't look like much on the modeling, but I'm telling you, this is going to be an interesting high-impact event for some of these areas, and certainly much-needed rainfall, as you can see on the right-hand side of the graphic. And again, and I forgot to put a link to this in the morning discussion, so I will now. For interest in Eastern North Carolina, this is important info, so I will link to it. We've kind of had a dull weather pattern lately with warm and sunny, not very fall-like, and all of a sudden we're jumping up to nor'easter season and coastal storm season. Speaking of storms, next week we've got to really pay attention. This is today, just minor thunderstorm, whatever, no big deal really. Tomorrow, more of the same, mainly Eastern North Carolina, it looks like, where I will be with Robert. And then as we get into next week, though, this is where it starts to get interesting. Day 4, there's an area advertised in southwest Texas, and then day 5, central Texas. And a potent storm system going to evolve from a changing weather pattern. We'll look at that more probably on the Monday update, which I guess, yeah, absolutely, because that's going to be day 4 from now or something like that, whatever. But yeah, no big hurricane to worry about, which is great. We're done. All that's fine. But here, keep this in mind. Look, it's mid-November. Hurricane season officially ends in 2 weeks roughly, and then it's just 6 months until the next one begins. So there's not a lot of downtime for people to get back on their feet and be ready for the next time. And there's just a lot of stuff involved with it. Why hurricanes are so important, in our history, in the economy, and how things have changed, even politically. There could be a whole series, a documentary series on how hurricanes have affected the United States in ways more than just what you see by the damage and the loss of life. A very interesting part of U.S. history that I think a lot of people just don't understand. And, and they're not into it as much as I am. That's okay. I'm not into some of the things everybody else is, right? But at least in this situation, the models pulled the rug out from under us, and that's fine. But again, we don't want to neglect and detract from what could be happening for our friends down there in Central America. All right? So tomorrow should be live from the Outer Banks. Tune in to our YouTube. We'll have that fired up. And it'll only be a few hours because I got to get back home tomorrow afternoon. We got high school football playoffs and all kinds of stuff. Plus, the storm's going to be pretty short, in and out in just a few hours. But yeah, starting early tomorrow morning, we'll be live from the Outer Banks, and I'll see you on Fox Weather as well. Hey, thanks for tuning in to me this afternoon. I appreciate your time and attention. From all of us at HurricaneTrack, I'm Mark Sudduth. I'll see you from Rodanthe tomorrow.